The young hotel receptionist squinted at the man standing before her. He carried a single worn-out leather bag and wore a plain shirt that looked far too ordinary for a place like this. Behind him, glass chandeliers glittered and designer luggage rolled across marble floors. She straightened her tie, lifted her chin, and said sharply, "Sir, this area is for VIP guests only. Deliveries go through the side entrance." The man smiled faintly, calm as a quiet morning. "I'm not here for a delivery," he said softly. "I have a reservation." Her eyebrows arched in disbelief. "A reservation here?" Before he could answer, the assistant manager, Tina, strode over, heels clicking like a metronome of pride. She glanced at the man's scuffed shoes, his simple watch, and that peaceful expression that somehow made her more irritated. "Security should stop letting people like this in," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. A few guests chuckled. Others watched, sensing drama brewing. The man didn't react. He only looked around the grand lobby, the golden pillars, the polished piano, the enormous chandelier raining light on everyone below. For a moment it seemed like he was observing a lesson unfold, not an insult being thrown. "Sir," the receptionist said again, firmer this time, "you really don't belong here." The man nodded slowly, almost as if he agreed. "Maybe," he whispered. "But sometimes the people who don't seem to belong are the ones who came for a reason." She rolled her eyes. "Look, please don't make this difficult. We have high-profile guests arriving soon." The elevator doors opened, releasing a group of photographers carrying equipment. The man stepped aside politely, helping one who nearly tripped on a cable. Even in rejection, his manners didn't falter. What no one in that lobby knew, what not even Tina could imagine, was that within minutes, the same man she dismissed would be the reason every camera in that building turned toward the front desk. Because this quiet stranger was Jonathan Roumie, the man millions recognized as the face of humility and faith from the chosen. And what he was about to do next would leave every guest, every worker, and even the proud manager speechless. It was one of those bright Los Angeles mornings when everything looked perfect. From the glass towers gleaming in the sunlight to the polished Rolls-Royces pulling up at the entrance of the Grand Meridian Hotel. Inside the lobby, everything sparkled. Marble floors so clean they reflected faces, orchids perfectly arranged in crystal vases, and music so soft it almost whispered luxury. Behind the front desk stood Tina Carver, the manager, elegant, confident, and proud of her authority. She had worked 10 years to reach this position, and she guarded it with an iron will. To her, this hotel wasn't just a workplace. It was a stage, and on that stage she was the star. Every morning, Tina reminded her staff that image mattered more than intention. "This is a 5-star establishment," she would say, tapping her manicured nails on the counter. "Our guests expect perfection. Never let anyone think we serve ordinary people." The younger clerks nodded, intimidated and eager to please. They knew what she meant. Wealthy guests were welcome. Everyone else was a potential inconvenience. That day was special. The hotel was hosting a private charity gala for a major humanitarian foundation. Hollywood executives, corporate donors, and social media personalities were expected to attend. Photographers had already gathered near the grand staircase waiting for arrivals. Tina had rehearsed everything, from the greetings to the seating. Her name would be printed in the next morning's society column. She was sure of it. So when the elevator bell rang and a quiet man stepped out, carrying a single duffel bag, he didn't fit the picture she had painted in her mind. No assistant. No security detail. No stylist following behind. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if he wasn't in a hurry to impress anyone. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes carried depth, the kind that made people feel seen without being judged. Jonathan Roumie, though Tina didn't recognize him, had arrived a few hours early. He had flown in from a charity event in Texas and planned to rest before the evening's fundraiser, a fundraiser organized in his honor for children in need. But to Tina, he was just another unimportant guest who didn't belong in the lobby of perfection. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, tried to keep her composure when he approached the desk. "Good morning," Jonathan said gently, smiling. "I have a reservation under Roumie. I believe it's for 2 nights. Sarah hesitated, glancing at his clothes, then at Tina. Tina gave a small shake of her head, signaling, "Don't waste time." Sir?" Sarah stammered. Are you sure this is the right hotel? We don't seem to— Tina cut in sharply. Sir, deliveries are handled through the side entrance. The service desk is on the lower floor. Jonathan blinked once, taken aback, not offended, just surprised by the assumption. Oh, I see, he said softly. No delivery today. Just checking in. Tina crossed her arms. Checking in, here? She forced a laugh. Sir, this is a luxury property. Perhaps you're looking for the Meridian Express down the street. The air around them shifted. Guests nearby turned to listen. One man whispered, Who's that? Another chuckled. Probably lost. Jonathan lowered his eyes briefly. No worries, he said. I'll double-check my confirmation email. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. But before he could open it, Tina spoke again, her voice dripping with authority. You see, sir, this lobby is for VIP arrivals today. We have important people coming. Producers, sponsors, actors. She smiled tightly, unaware of the irony. Jonathan's calm gaze met hers. I understand, he said simply. But maybe one day we'll remember that being important and being kind aren't the same thing. The words lingered like a drop of water hitting still glass. Sarah froze, unsure whether to apologize or stay silent. Tina forced a laugh to break the tension. Sir, please don't make this difficult. We're very busy today. She waved her hand toward security. Could you kindly assist this gentleman back outside? Jonathan nodded once, still calm. No need, he said, stepping aside gracefully. I'll wait here, and wait he did. For a moment he stood quietly, watching the bustling lobby, the pride, the rush, the endless striving for appearances. He noticed the bellhop struggling with heavy luggage, the cleaner trying to go unnoticed, and the receptionist, now visibly nervous after realizing maybe she'd gone too far. He smiled at her, a small, understanding smile, then sat on one of the lobby's velvet chairs. What no one knew was that within minutes, a convoy of black cars would arrive at the entrance. Inside those cars were the hotel owner, the foundation's directors, and a group of media representatives. They weren't here for the influencers or executives. They were here for him, the man sitting quietly in the corner, who had just been told he didn't belong, and in that moment, the stage Tina guarded so fiercely was about to turn, because the star she'd dismissed was about to step into the spotlight in a way she could never have imagined. The sound of laughter echoed faintly from across the marble lobby, soft, almost polite, but sharp enough to cut. Tina stood behind the counter, arms folded, watching Jonathan sit quietly on the velvet chair near the corner. His calmness annoyed her. People who didn't argue somehow made her feel smaller. The young receptionist, Sarah, looked uneasy. Ma'am, she whispered, I think he really does have a booking. Should I check? Tina didn't look up from her screen. No, I don't care if he claims to own the place. He doesn't belong in that seat, not dressed like that. But, Sarah? Tina interrupted, her tone cold. Trust me, men like him waste our time. He probably wants photos with our guests later. Just watch. A few feet away, a group of business travelers chuckled as they watched the scene unfold. Must be some kind of wannabe, one of them murmured. No way he's staying here, Jonathan heard it all. He didn't flinch. He simply folded his hands, his eyes following the steady dance of the hotel fountain. There was something serene about him, like a man who had long learned to choose peace over pride. Minutes passed. The gala preparations grew busier. Photographers checked their lenses. The catering manager rushed through with trays of desserts. Security adjusted velvet ropes for the arriving guests. Then something unexpected happened. The hotel's assistant concierge, a middle-aged man named Leo, walked by carrying a clipboard. He glanced at Jonathan, paused, and frowned as if trying to place the face. His eyes widened slightly. He whispered to a colleague, Is that the guy who plays Jesus in The Chosen? The other man shrugged, uncertain. Leo stepped closer, cautious but respectful. Sir, forgive me for asking. Are you? Jonathan smiled gently. Yes, Jonathan Roumie. Leo's mouth fell open. Oh my goodness. Sir, you're the guest of honor for tonight's charity gala. We've been preparing for you all week. Tina looked up sharply. What did you say? Before Leo could answer, Tina scoffed. Oh, please. That's ridiculous. If he were the guest of honor, I'd have been informed. Look at him. No publicist, no assistant. This is Hollywood, Leo. People like him don't walk in alone. Leo hesitated. Ma'am, I've seen the brief. His photo is right here. He turned the clipboard toward her, and there it was, Jonathan's picture printed under the headline, Guest of Honor, Jonathan Roumie, humanitarian and actor. A silence fell. The only sound was the steady hum of the fountain and the distant clinking of glassware. Sarah's face drained of color. Tina's smirk faltered, then froze completely, but she tried to recover. Well, anyone can print a photo. This doesn't prove anything. Her voice cracked slightly, the first sign of panic creeping in. Jonathan rose slowly from his seat. He didn't look angry, just thoughtful. He walked toward the desk, every step calm, measured. Guests turned to watch, sensing something bigger was about to unfold. "Tina," he said softly. "Right?" Her name on his lips made her flinch. "Yes." "May I ask," he continued, "why you thought I didn't belong here?" She swallowed. I just assumed," he tilted his head slightly. "Assumed what?" "That you were here for deliveries or not a guest." He smiled faintly. "And what made you think that?" Tina couldn't answer. Her eyes darted around the lobby, searching for support. None came. Even Sarah looked away. Jonathan nodded slowly. "You see, it's easy to look at someone and decide what they're worth. It's harder to look and see who they really are." The words landed softly, but they echoed through the room. Before anyone could speak, the sound of tires screeched outside. Through the glass doors, 3 black cars rolled up. Hotel staff straightened instantly, realizing the VIP convoy had arrived. The doors opened, and in walked the hotel owner, followed by executives from the Charity Foundation and a few members of the press. "Jonathan," the owner exclaimed warmly. "We've been waiting for you." "My apologies for the confusion earlier. Please allow us to escort you to your suite." The entire lobby froze. Cameras flashed. Guests whispered. Tina stood motionless, her pride crumbling like sand underwater. The owner turned toward her. "Tina, is this how you welcome our guest now? Especially him?" She stuttered. "Sir, I didn't know." Jonathan raised a hand gently. "It's all right." She didn't know. "But maybe, now she does." His voice was soft, but the weight of it filled the room. No shouting, no anger, just truth spoken with grace. As he walked toward the elevators with the owner, the crowd parted silently, watching him go. Some guests lowered their heads in shame, others clapped quietly, and Tina, she stood behind the desk, heart pounding, realizing she had just dismissed the very man the hotel had been preparing to honor. What none of them knew yet was that Jonathan Roumie's response that evening wouldn't just forgive her mistake. It would transform the meaning of respect inside that hotel forever. The lobby had never felt so quiet. For a moment, the only sounds were the faint trickle of the marble fountain and the soft hum of air conditioning. Every eye in the room was fixed on Jonathan Roumie, the man who, just minutes earlier, had been mistaken for a delivery worker, now revealed as the guest of honor. Tina stood frozen behind the counter, her reflection trembling in the polished glass surface. Her chest tightened as reality sank in. The very man she had dismissed with condescension was now being escorted by the hotel's owner himself. Sarah, the young receptionist, bit her lip, torn between guilt and relief. Guilt for not standing up sooner. Relief that Jonathan had met the humiliation with such calm grace. The guests who had laughed earlier shifted uneasily, pretending to check their phones or whispering apologies to no one in particular. The business travelers who had mocked him suddenly found their expensive suits didn't feel so comfortable. Jonathan paused halfway toward the elevators. He turned gently, his calm gaze sweeping the room. It wasn't a look of pride or satisfaction. It was one of deep reflection, almost sorrow. "I didn't come here to be honored," he said quietly, addressing the room more than anyone in particular. "I came here to support a cause, to help children who don't have homes or food or anyone to tell them they belong." A few guests lowered their heads. The words cut softly but deeply, unraveling layers of pride in the people listening. Jonathan turned to the hotel owner, Mr. Whitmore, who stood beside him looking embarrassed. "Mr. Roumie," Whitmore began, "please allow me to apologize. This is completely unacceptable." "Tina will—" Jonathan raised a hand slightly, stopping him. "No punishment," he said gently. "Just perspective." Tina's eyes welled with tears. It wasn't anger that broke her. It was the unbearable weight of his mercy. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Roumie," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I judged you without reason. I thought. He smiled kindly. You thought you knew who belonged and who didn't. She nodded, ashamed. He stepped closer to the counter, close enough for her to see the compassion in his eyes. Calm, steady, unshaken. The truth is, he continued, we've all done it at some point. Looked at someone and decided their worth in a second. But worth doesn't wear a suit. It doesn't carry a brand. It lives in how we treat people when we think no one's watching. Those words hung in the air like a sacred pause. The staff stopped moving. The guests stopped whispering. Even the security guard near the door looked moved. Sarah wiped her eyes quietly. She had seen countless guests come and go, but never one who carried such peace. Peace that didn't need to prove itself. Jonathan turned slightly, catching sight of Leo, the concierge who had recognized him earlier. Thank you for speaking up, he said warmly. That takes courage. Leo shook his head. Sir, it was just my duty. Duty, Jonathan said with a smile, is what we're paid for. Courage is what we choose. The elevator bell chimed softly behind them, waiting, but Jonathan didn't step in yet. He turned once more toward the front desk, his voice gentle but strong. Tina, Sarah, may I ask something of you? They both nodded quickly. Next time someone walks in who looks like they don't belong, he said, welcome them anyway. You never know whose story you might be a part of. Tina covered her face, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes, sir, she whispered. Sarah smiled faintly through her own tears. We will, sir. The hotel owner placed a hand on Jonathan's shoulder. You've just given everyone here a lesson we'll never forget. Jonathan shook his head. It's not a lesson, sir. It's a reminder. He finally stepped into the elevator. As the doors began to close, the crowd stood in respectful silence. Just before they shut, he offered one last line, soft, almost like a prayer. Kindness is free, but it's worth more than anything money can buy. The doors closed with a gentle chime. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then, as if breaking a spell, the entire lobby burst into quiet applause. Not for fame, not for power, but for grace. Tina sank into her chair, tears still flowing. He could have humiliated me, she whispered to Sarah. But he didn't, Sarah said softly. He taught us. That evening, long after Jonathan had gone to his suite, the story spread through the entire hotel, from housekeeping to management. The man they had nearly turned away had left behind something greater than anger. He had left a mirror, one that showed every person who they truly were when no one was watching. And as the sun dipped beyond the city skyline, the Grand Meridian Hotel felt different, quieter, kinder. Because for the first time in a long while, everyone inside understood what it truly meant to belong. That evening, the Grand Meridian Hotel glowed like a palace. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above a ballroom filled with the city's most powerful faces. Golden cutlery gleamed under warm light. Laughter and chatter filled the air, mingling with the music of a live orchestra. The theme of the night was Hearts Without Borders, a charity dinner to raise funds for children's hospitals. But behind all the glamour, every staff member felt the weight of what had happened that morning. Tina stood near the side of the ballroom, her usual confidence replaced by humility. She wore a simple black uniform now. No jewelry, no loud perfume, no arrogance. Every time she saw Jonathan's face on the event banners, her heart sank and swelled all at once. Sarah worked quietly beside her, greeting guests. She noticed that the staff behaved differently tonight, gentler, more respectful, not because of rules, but because something had shifted inside them. At the far end of the room, Jonathan Roumie stood with Mr. Whitmore, the hotel owner and the event organizers. He looked effortlessly calm, dressed in a classic black suit that somehow made him blend in rather than stand out. Cameras flashed occasionally, but his presence wasn't loud, it was grounding. When the dinner began, the lights dimmed slightly, and a spotlight found the stage. Mr. Whitmore stepped up to the podium, his voice echoing through the room. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, tonight we gather not just to celebrate generosity, but to remember humanity. Our guest of honor embodies both, a man whose work has inspired millions around the world, and whose humility reminded even us, here in this hotel, what true hospitality means. Please welcome Jonathan Roumie. Applause filled the ballroom. Jonathan walked to the stage, nodding politely as he took the microphone. He waited for the clapping to fade, then smiled softly. Thank you, he said. I'm truly honored to be here. But tonight isn't about me. It's about what happens when compassion meets action. He paused, his eyes scanning the room, pausing briefly on Tina, who stood frozen near the back. Their eyes met for a second. She looked down, tears already building. I want to share a short story, Jonathan continued. This morning, I had the privilege of walking into this very hotel. I say privilege because sometimes the lessons we need most come when we least expect them. A faint ripple moved through the crowd. A few guests who'd witnessed the morning incident shifted uneasily. I was greeted by a few kind faces, Jonathan said gently, and one not so kind one. But you know what I realized? That moment wasn't about disrespect, it was about reflection. Because we all forget sometimes. We forget that the person standing before us has a story we haven't read yet. The crowd grew silent. Even the orchestra members stopped tuning their instruments. Jonathan smiled faintly. The world doesn't need more people who look important. It needs more people who make others feel important. Applause began softly, then grew louder, rising like a wave. But Jonathan raised his hand modestly, signaling for quiet. There's someone here tonight, he said, who reminded me that humility is still alive, even after a mistake. Tina, could you please come up for a moment? Gasps filled the ballroom. Every head turned. Tina froze. Her heart pounded. Me? She whispered to Sarah. Sarah squeezed her hand. Go, you'll regret it if you don't. With trembling legs, Tina walked toward the stage. Every step felt like 1,000 eyes watching her shame. But when she reached Jonathan, he didn't look disappointed. He looked kind. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan said, this woman made an assumption about me this morning. But she also did something many people never do. Now she owned it. She apologized. He turned slightly toward her. And that takes courage. Tina wiped her eyes, whispering, I don't deserve this kindness. Jonathan smiled. None of us earn kindness. We choose it. The audience was silent, when no camera flashes, no murmurs, just stillness. He handed her a small envelope. This, he said, is a personal donation to the hotel's employee fund. I want every member of this staff, from cleaning crew to management, to share in it equally. Because respect isn't given to titles, it's given to hearts. Tina broke down in tears, covering her face as the entire ballroom rose to its feet. The applause was thunderous now, not for fame or wealth, but for grace. Jonathan waited for it to fade before speaking one final time. Let this hotel, this place, be remembered not for its stars or its marble, but for its people. The ones who serve, and the ones who learn to serve better. He stepped back, gave a small bow, and walked off the stage. That night, the charity gala raised more than it ever had before. But what people remembered wasn't the money. It was the moment a man who'd been told he didn't belong showed everyone what belonging really means. The morning sun poured gently through the tall glass windows of the Grand Meridian Hotel, painting gold streaks across the marble floor. The ballroom, once filled with laughter and applause, now stood silent, scattered napkins, half-empty glasses, and faint echoes of a night that had touched every heart inside those walls. For the staff, it wasn't an ordinary morning. Something had shifted, something you couldn't quite name but could certainly feel. Conversations were quieter, smiles were softer, and even the clinking of breakfast trays seemed less hurried. Tina stood behind the front desk, hands folded, eyes red from a sleepless night. She'd replayed the gala over and over in her mind. Jonathan's words, his gentleness, the moment he called her onto the stage when she least deserved it. Her pride, once as polished as the marble beneath her feet, had crumbled. But what replaced it was something far more valuable. Humility, gratitude, a second chance. Sarah arrived early too, placing a warm cup of coffee beside her manager. You okay? She asked softly. Tina managed a small smile. I will be. It's strange. I've worked here for years, and last night was the first time I actually felt proud of this place. Not for how it looks, but for what it meant. Before Sarah could respond, a familiar voice spoke behind them. Good morning, they turned. It was Jonathan Roumie. No cameras, no press. Just him, wearing a simple gray jacket, his bag over his shoulder, and the same calm smile that had disarmed an entire room the day before. Mr. Roumie, Tina began, standing quickly. I thought you'd left already. I wanted to check out in person, he said. I believe kindness deserves a proper goodbye. Tina lowered her eyes, humbled. Sir, I don't know how to thank you. You didn't have to be so gracious yesterday. I was wrong, terribly wrong. Jonathan smiled. You weren't wrong, Tina, you were just human. We all forget sometimes to see beyond appearances. Sarah stepped forward, nervously clutching the counter. You changed the entire staff last night, sir. People are different this morning. Jonathan looked around the lobby. Good, he said softly. Because change isn't real until it shows in how we treat people when no one's watching. The elevator chimed as a bellhop approached with Jonathan's bag. It was Leo, the concierge who'd recognized him the day before. Sir, Leo said, smiling, thank you again for what you said about courage. My daughter watched your show. She couldn't believe I got to meet you. Jonathan chuckled. Tell her she has a brave father. He turned to Tina. You've been managing this place for a long time, haven't you? Tina nodded hesitantly. Yes, sir. Almost 10 years. You've built something beautiful, he said. Now make sure it stays beautiful. Not just on the outside. Tina swallowed hard, emotions rising again. I promise. He reached into his jacket and handed her a small white envelope. No logo, no seal, just her name written in neat handwriting. What's this? She asked. A note, he said. For you. Read it later. She nodded, speechless. Jonathan turned toward the old doorman who had been silently standing by the entrance all morning, a man with gray hair and kind eyes. Jonathan walked over, shook his hand and said, Thank you for opening the door yesterday, even when others wanted it closed. The doorman smiled. It's my job, sir. Jonathan winked. It's your calling. With that, he picked up his bag. All right then, he said cheerfully. I'll be on my way. Tina suddenly stepped forward. Sir, wait. He turned back. She took a deep breath. If it's all right, may I ask you something? Of course. Now, why didn't you get angry? Anyone else would have shouted, demanded punishment. But you didn't. Jonathan paused. Then he smiled, that quiet, peaceful smile that seemed to hold an ocean of patience behind it. Because anger teaches fear, he said. But forgiveness teaches change. I'd rather see a heart transformed than a person humiliated. The lobby fell utterly silent. Even the bellhop stopped breathing for a moment. Jonathan nodded kindly to everyone, then stepped outside into the bright morning light. The door closed behind him, but his words lingered like sunlight that refused to fade. Tina stood frozen, the envelope still in her hands. Slowly, she opened it. Inside was a single note written in neat handwriting. True leadership begins the day you choose empathy over ego. Jonathan, her tears fell quietly onto the paper. Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder. You'll frame that, won't you? Tina smiled through her tears. No, she whispered. I'll live it. Outside, Jonathan Roumie walked down the busy Los Angeles street, unnoticed by most, unguarded, unbothered. But inside that hotel, 100 hearts carried the light he'd left behind. And though the marble floors still shone and the chandeliers still glittered, it wasn't the luxury that made the Grand Meridian beautiful anymore. It was the people. Because one man's calm humility had turned pride into purpose, and strangers into a family that finally understood what it truly meant to belong. The Grand Meridian Hotel never returned to being the same after that morning. It still had the same gold chandeliers, the same polished marble floors, the same grand staircase curling upward like a royal ribbon. But the spirit inside those walls had changed. For the first time, it felt alive in a way that money could never buy. Every staff member had gone home that night with the same thought echoing in their mind. You don't belong here. The very words that once carried insult had now become a question of conscience. Because each of them realized belonging isn't about wealth, fame, or luxury. It's about humanity. And the moment they lost sight of that truth, they stopped belonging anywhere at all. Tina stood by the lobby window long after Jonathan Roumie had left. The world outside bustled as usual. Taxis honking, tourists snapping photos, the city alive in its usual rhythm. But inside her, something had slowed down. For years, she had measured people by their appearances, by how expensive their clothes looked, by how confidently they spoke, by how much they tipped. She thought respect was something people had to earn from her. Now she realized how wrong she had been. Respect isn't earned from someone. It's given by someone. And its real test isn't how we treat the rich or the famous, but how we treat the ones who seem to have nothing to offer in return. That morning, she gathered all the staff together. No anger, no orders, just honesty. "I don't want us to be a hotel that serves guests," she said softly. "I want us to be a hotel that serves people." For a moment, the room was quiet. Then the old doorman nodded. Sarah smiled. Leo clapped once, and soon the entire staff joined in. From that day forward, the Grand Meridian changed its ways. The staff created a new policy, one Jonathan himself had inspired. Every month they hosted a kindness day where anyone, regardless of status, could walk in for a free meal, a cup of coffee, and a warm conversation. No one asked for money. No one asked for proof of who they were. The only thing required was a smile. Guests noticed the difference. The hotel's reviews didn't just mention the rooms or the food anymore. They mentioned the people. And it all began because one man refused to meet arrogance with anger. Weeks later, a letter arrived at the hotel. It was from Jonathan Roumie. Inside, there was no autograph, no fancy signature, just a simple handwritten note. "I heard about your kindness days. That's beautiful. Never forget, you don't need to play the role of someone powerful to make an impact. You only need to remember who you truly are. Keep the doors open, not just to the hotel, but to your hearts. Jonathan." Tina read the letter aloud to her team, her voice trembling slightly. She smiled through tears, whispering, "He didn't change our rules, he changed our hearts." That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, she walked to the same counter where she'd once looked Jonathan in the eye and told him he didn't belong. She ran her hand along the polished surface and whispered, "You'll always belong here now. And if you stood outside the Grand Meridian today, you might still hear laughter and the faint hum of piano music drifting through the doors. But if you listen closely, really closely, you'll feel something else too. A quiet reminder that kindness never goes out of style." Because somewhere between the sparkle of wealth and the noise of pride, Jonathan Roumie reminded an entire room of people that humility is the highest form of grace. He showed that power isn't loud, it's gentle, that real faith isn't about grand gestures, it's about small mercies, and that true belonging doesn't depend on where you stand, but on how you make others feel when they stand beside you. So the next time someone looks down on you, or tells you, "You don't belong here," remember Jonathan's calm smile. Remember how he didn't fight back, didn't shout, didn't need to prove anything. Because sometimes the most powerful response is quiet dignity. And sometimes the people who don't belong are exactly the ones sent to remind everyone else what belonging really means. If you believe that respect is strength, not weakness, if you believe that humility can change hearts, then type respect in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Because kindness, like faith, knows no borders. Stay humble, stay kind, and never forget real power is silent.